We were 30 minutes into our flight when I caught the first hint that something was off. And I don't mean turbulence off. I mean the kind of gut-deep twist you feel when your instincts start screaming at you before your brain can catch up. It was supposed to be a trip to save us. My name's Michael. I'm 38. My wife, Lana, is 35. We'd been together for 10 years, married for 8. And for the last year or so, things between us had felt tired, distant. You know that kind of distance you can't measure in miles, but in silences, phone glances, and the way she'd flinch a little when I touched her arm? That kind of distance. So I suggested a vacation, somewhere warm, somewhere without distractions. Just us. A fresh start. She smiled like I'd handed her the keys to a second chance. She kissed me on the cheek and said, "You're right. We need this." She even helped plan everything, down to the hotel suite with the ocean view. That should have been my first red flag. Lana never liked planning. She'd always leave those things to me. But this time she was motivated, too motivated. Still, I wanted to believe. I needed to believe. I was still the guy who thought you don't walk away from someone just because it's hard. I'd seen my parents do that, break their marriage like a cheap plastic toy and never talk again. I swore I wouldn't end up like that. So here we were, on a plane headed to the Dominican Republic. She wore a light hoodie, yoga pants, and earbuds, scrolling her phone with a casual smirk I hadn't seen in months. The flight was about 4 hours. I figured we'd nap a bit, watch a movie, maybe talk. Instead, she kept glancing over her shoulder toward the back of the cabin. At first I thought it was nerves. Lana had always hated flying, but it wasn't nerves. It was something else. She'd adjust her seat, fix her hair, lean to the side to look behind us again. Then she excused herself to go to the restroom. 5 minutes passed. 10. 15. At first, I just thought she was sick. Maybe airsick. I waited. I sipped the free ginger ale. I checked my phone. I asked the attendant if she was okay. "Restroom still occupied," she said politely. Then something happened I will never forget for as long as I live. A man, maybe late 30s, athletic build, that kind of artificial tan you don't get naturally, walked back from the lavatory, adjusting his belt. A few seconds later, Lana slipped out after him, smoothing her hoodie, face flushed. They didn't speak. They didn't even look at each other. But my stomach dropped like the plane had hit an air pocket. The way she walked back to our seat, composed, casual, almost too casual, made me feel like I was losing my mind, like I had imagined it. She sat down beside me like nothing happened, opened her Kindle, and started reading like she was just another wife flying to paradise with her husband. I didn't say a word. Not then. Not on the rest of the flight. But in my chest, something had snapped. And that was only the beginning. We landed just after sunset. The sky over Punta Cana was soft orange melting into dark blue, palm trees swaying like they were mocking me, too calm, too perfect, too disconnected from what I felt inside. I still hadn't said anything. The whole time in the customs line, grabbing our bags, catching the shuttle, I was silent. My thoughts were screaming, looping the same question over and over. Did she really just do that? On the plane? With a stranger? But it wasn't just suspicion anymore. Not after the look on her face when she sat back down. That silent, smooth lie behind the eyes. I knew that look. I'd seen it once before, for years ago when I found flirty messages between her and some guy from her spin class. She swore it was innocent, said I was being controlling, said it never went anywhere. Maybe it didn't. Maybe it did. Back then, I let it go. This time, I couldn't. The hotel was gorgeous. White walls and glass, hanging lights, a scent in the lobby like vanilla and citrus. The kind of place where people smiled too much and handed you champagne before you even got your room key. Lana acted like everything was fine. She even leaned her head on my shoulder in the elevator like we were newlyweds. "This is going to be good for us," she whispered. I felt sick. The room was beautiful. Ocean view, balcony, king-sized bed with flower petals shaped like a heart. She went straight to the minibar and poured herself a glass of wine. "You're quiet," she said, sitting on the bed, crossing her legs. I sat in the armchair. I looked right at her and said, "Who was the guy on the plane?" She blinked, smirked, like I'd asked if she'd stolen a towel. What guy? The one you came out of the bathroom with. Same guy you kept looking back at. The one you didn't talk to, didn't even look at, because it would have made it too obvious. Silence. Her smile died, and for half a second, I saw it. Fear. Not shame. Not guilt. Fear. Then she laughed, like it was ridiculous. Are you serious right now? Dead serious. She stood up, took a long sip of wine, walked to the balcony, didn't answer, just stared out at the ocean like I wasn't even in the room. I didn't push it that night. I didn't scream or accuse. I just laid down on that damn bed beside her and stared at the ceiling, listening to her breathe, pretending to be asleep. It was the worst night of my life, because I knew something happened. I just didn't know how far it had gone yet, but I was going to find out. I didn't follow her that day. I let her come back from yoga like nothing had changed. She was all smiles and sunshine, like a woman reborn. Said she felt aligned. Said we should book a couples massage for later in the week. Said she was glad we came. I nodded, played along, but I already had a plan. Room 407, same hotel, same time. I waited until just before then. Told her I was heading down to the bar for a drink and a little solo time. She didn't blink, just waved me off and kept scrolling through her phone like she was deep in something more interesting than me. I went to the front desk. Told them I'd left my sunglasses in room 407 earlier when visiting a friend, but they weren't answering now. Can I get someone to let me in real quick? I smiled, lied with ease. It's super important. Their prescription. The guy hesitated. I leaned in, gave him a folded $20. He shrugged, called a staff member. A woman with a key card came with me. I felt like I was walking toward an execution. I waited outside room 407, 3:59 p.m. The door opened. The woman let me in, asked if I needed help looking. I said no thanks, made a show of checking around the table and nightstand. Then I asked if she could give us some privacy, friend might be back soon. She nodded and left. I waited. For 03 p.m., I heard footsteps. Then Lana's voice. Low. Laughing. The door opened again. She walked in first, turning to say something over her shoulder. Then he followed. Same guy from the plane. I knew it instantly. He locked the door. And I'll never forget this moment, she turned around and saw me standing there in the room. Her entire face fell, just crumbled. The guy's smile disappeared. He looked like he wanted to vanish into the carpet. Lana didn't speak. I didn't either. Not right away. I walked up to her, calmly, looked her dead in the eyes. Didn't even wait 24 hours, huh? She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. He stepped forward. Hey, man, look it. Shut your mouth, I snapped. My voice cracked, but I didn't yell. You don't speak to me. Lana finally managed. Michael, this isn't what it looks like. I actually laughed. Loud. Bitter. No? Because it looks exactly like what I thought it was. Then I pulled my phone out and showed her the screenshots. The messages. The photo. She froze. Color drained from her face. I stepped back, gave them space, like I was the intruder. Then I walked to the door, hand on the handle, turned back once more and said, You'll hear from my lawyer. And I left. I spent the next few hours walking the beach like a ghost. I don't even remember where I went exactly, just sand under my shoes, waves I couldn't hear, and a pressure behind my eyes like a balloon ready to burst. I didn't cry. Not yet. I was too full of adrenaline, of anger and disbelief welded together into something sharp and unrelenting. The betrayal wasn't just that she cheated. It was that she planned it, with precision, on our trip that I had booked to try and save our marriage. She used that as cover, and somehow, that cut deeper than anything else. When I got back to our room, my room now, she wasn't there. Her suitcase was gone. Nothing left but the folded towel she used that morning and the half-empty bottle of sunscreen she'd packed like this was going to be a honeymoon. I was glad she left. I needed space. But I also needed something else, evidence. So I did something I never thought I'd do. I called a lawyer, a recommendation from a friend back home, a guy who handled messy stuff, as he put it, divorce and fraud. The guy answered on the second ring, and within 20 minutes we had a call set up for the next day. Then I went back to the front desk. This time, no lies. I asked for the manager. Told him what happened calmly, respectfully, that my wife had committed infidelity on hotel grounds in another guest room. I asked if there was any security footage from the hallway outside room 407. At first, he was stiff, cautious, told me privacy was important. But when I showed him the messages and reminded him how bad press can be for a place like this, his tone shifted. "We'll review the footage," he said. "If we find anything, we'll let you know." I thought that would be the end of it. But the next morning, there was a USB drive in an envelope at the front desk with my name on it. No note, no explanation. I took it back to my room, opened my laptop, plugged it in. There it was. Lana, walking down the hallway at 3:57 p.m., checking her phone, glancing over her shoulder, smiling. Then him 15 seconds later. They kissed at the door. It wasn't just a hookup. It wasn't just some impulsive mistake. It was intimate, familiar, like it had been going on a while. I downloaded everything, duplicated it to the cloud, sent it to the lawyer. That night, I sat on the balcony alone with a glass of rum, listening to the ocean and wondering how many other lies I had mistaken for love. When I got back home a few days later, alone, I walked into our house like I was stepping onto a stage that had already collapsed. Everything was where it used to be, but it didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a set, a version of life I'd been acting in, while she wrote a different script behind my back. Lana hadn't come back with me. She stayed behind in the Dominican Republic for a few more days, she texted. No apology, no explanation, just, "I need time to process." This trip was hard for both of us. Hard for both of us? She cheated in an airplane bathroom. Now she needed space? I didn't reply. Instead, I met with my lawyer, Dan, a quiet, detail-obsessed guy who looked like he'd never missed a deadline in his life. I gave him the screenshots, the USB footage, everything. He leaned back in his chair and said, "You've got a hell of a case. Especially if we can show she used marital funds to set this up." That's when I paused. "What do you mean? If she coordinated this trip, booked anything in advance with your joint accounts for the purpose of facilitating an affair, and you can prove that? That's marital fraud. It changes everything, especially in divorce court." We pulled statements, credit cards, shared accounts, airline bookings. That's when I found something that made my stomach drop, a PayPal charge from 2 weeks before the flight, sent from her account to his. $280 labeled, reimburse, ticket. She'd paid for his plane ticket. He wasn't some random guy who just happened to be flying to the same resort. She had flown him out behind my back, on our vacation, our fix-it trip. Dan's eyebrows raised. "Well, that's game over," he said. He filed for divorce on my behalf the next day. Irreconcilable differences with detailed notes about infidelity, deception, and misuse of joint assets. We also requested a temporary restraining order on joint accounts to prevent her from draining them. A week later, Lana came home, suntanned and furious. She slammed through the door like she was the wronged one. "Are you serious right now?" she snapped, throwing her bag down. "Freezing the accounts? Filing behind my back?" I didn't even get up from the couch. "No need to act surprised. I gave you a chance to come clean. You chose a stranger in a bathroom." She scoffed. "You don't understand anything. We haven't been happy for months. I didn't want this. I was lonely. You shut me out. This is on you too." There it was. The classic script flip, blame shifting. Justify the affair by rewriting history. I didn't bite. I just said, "Tell it to the judge." Divorce court doesn't move fast, but when it does, it hits like a freight train. Then filed the motion for discovery. That meant Lana was legally obligated to hand over any and all communication that might be relevant to the case. Texts, emails, financial transactions, travel documents. At first, she played dumb, claimed she deleted everything. But Dan had already subpoenaed her phone records and PayPal logs. And what we found painted a picture far worse than even I expected. Turns out this wasn't the first time she'd seen that man. His name was Brad. Of course it was. He wasn't a stranger. He wasn't some wild mistake. She'd known him for over 5 months, met him through an online friends-only travel group. One of those casual meetups that spirals into private chats and late-night FaceTime calls while your husband's asleep. They'd met twice before. Once in Dallas when she said she was at a work training, and once in Miami during a girls' weekend. Both trips I had helped her pack for. In the messages we recovered, hundreds of them, She talked about me like I was a boring roommate. He'll never know. He thinks this trip will fix us. It won't. Can't wait to see you again. Plain bathrooms are risky, but worth it. There was even a running joke between them. They called me Passport Daddy because I booked the trip and paid for everything. I'll be honest, I almost threw up. She wasn't just cheating. She was mocking me while she did it, turning me into a punchline. Then filed to have the affair classified as planned, premeditated infidelity using shared marital assets. That gave us leverage. Big leverage. We also requested an unequal distribution of assets, citing betrayal and financial deception. But here's where things got really interesting. The judge granted it, not just because of the messages, but because of the video evidence. I'll never forget sitting in that cold courtroom, watching Lana squirm in her chair while the hallway footage from room 407 played on the flat screen. The judge said almost nothing, just watched in silence, then looked down at his notes. Her lawyer tried to argue it was emotionally complicated. Dan responded, "There's nothing complicated about betrayal on camera." Outside the courtroom that day, Lana pulled me aside. She wasn't crying. She wasn't apologizing. She was angry. "You really want to humiliate me like this?" she said under her breath. I looked her right in the eye and said, "You did that to yourself." The hearing was set for Wednesday, 9 a.m. I was awake long before the alarm. Not because I was nervous, though. Maybe I was, but more because my body just knew. Today wasn't just another day. Today was the day. I put on a navy blue suit I had originally bought for our anniversary dinner. Funny, right? Now I was wearing it not to celebrate our marriage, but to bury it. Dan was already waiting on the courthouse steps when I got there. He held his folder the way a surgeon holds a scalpel, focused, deliberate. No pep talk, no jokes. Just a glance that said we're ready. "You good?" he asked quietly. I nodded. No need to say anything more. The courtroom was smaller than I imagined. White walls, wooden benches. It smelled faintly of paper and cleaning solution. Empty in a physical sense, but charged with something thick and electric. Lana was already there. She sat on the right, neat suit, no makeup, hair pulled back tight. Her lawyer was next to her, a guy who looked like he'd graduated law school last month. Too polished, too eager. The kind of guy who thought confidence alone could win a case. She didn't look at me. First time she avoided eye contact since all of this started. That's when I knew she was scared. This wasn't a hotel room. This wasn't a kitchen argument. This was court. And today, her words would have weight. There were no more soft landings. The judge walked in at 9:03 sharp. Older man, steel gray hair, thin glasses. He looked like someone who'd been doing this longer than we'd been married. The kind who didn't waste time on excuses. Now calling the case of Michael G. versus Lana G. Both parties present. "Yes, Your Honor," Dan said. "Yes, Your Honor," her lawyer echoed. The judge skimmed the top page of the file and looked up. "We're here to begin proceedings on the matter of marital asset division, with additional claims of infidelity, misuse of joint funds, and emotional damages. Mr. Wilkes, you may proceed." Dan didn't jump up dramatically. No theatrics. He just opened the folder and began with calm precision. "Your Honor, this is not a case of marital breakdown. This is a case of premeditated, concealed infidelity funded directly through shared marital assets. The alleged affair was not a spontaneous act of desperation. It was planned, booked, and executed under the guise of a reconciliation trip." He handed over a file to the judge. Inside, screenshots from her private messages. Saved snaps between her and Brad. The PayPal transaction for $280, marked reimburse ticket, and the hotel footage from Punta Cana. The judge leafed through slowly. His face gave away nothing. In addition, Dan continued, "We have bank statements clearly showing that the entire vacation, flights, hotel, meals, was paid for using a joint marital account, meaning my client unknowingly funded a romantic getaway for his wife and her affair partner." I saw Lana's jaw tighten. Her lawyer immediately stood. "Your Honor, we don't dispute the trip occurred, but we asked the court to consider the context. This marriage was already strained. My client felt isolated, unsupported." The judge cut him off gently. "You're suggesting the affair was emotionally justified?" "And no, not justified, just complicated." "Understood." Mr. Wilkes, continue. then opened a second folder. Inside, printouts from the online travel forum where she and Brad first met, Instagram screenshots, group chats, little captions that now hit like hammers. Another undercover weekend. Passport Daddy made it all possible. Dan read those aloud. No one spoke, not even the judge. And for once, Lana didn't blink. She just sat there, not crying, not angry, just small. She hadn't expected us to be this prepared. That was just the first hearing. The judge looked up and said, "We'll resume next session with testimony from the respondent. If you have anything to contradict this evidence, prepare to present it." Gavel. Recess. Dan and I walked outside into the bright morning light. "She's got nothing," he said plainly. "Let her try and fight it. We've already won. She just doesn't know it yet." And for the first time in months, I believed him. The second hearing was different. The energy in the room was tense, not loud, not angry, just tight. Like everyone knew the mask was about to fall off, and no one wanted to be caught blinking when it did. Lana was called to the stand. She walked up slow, hands folded tightly in her lap. She looked smaller somehow. Not physically, emotionally. Like the version of herself I used to know had already deflated under the weight of what she'd done. Her lawyer stood first. "Ms. G, would you describe the state of your marriage prior to this trip?" She didn't look at me. Not once. We were distant. I felt alone. Michael wasn't really present. I tried to talk about it, but he'd just shut down. I felt like I was married to a wall. The trip was supposed to help us reconnect. And did it? She hesitated, just enough to make it noticeable. "No," she said. By then, it was too late. "And the man on the plane? The man you were seen entering a hotel room with?" She paused again. "Longer. I made a mistake. It was emotional. I was vulnerable. It wasn't something I planned." Dan stood up slowly. "Permission to cross, Your Honor?" The judge nodded without a word. Dan approached her like a man opening a locked cabinet, methodically, carefully, fully aware of what he'd find inside. "Ms. G, you say the affair was not planned, that it was emotional. A mistake, yes. And yet you sent $280 to this man, Brad, via PayPal 2 weeks prior to the trip, labeling the transaction reimburse ticket. Is that correct?" She froze, then nodded, barely. Dan turned toward the judge. "For reference, Your Honor, this payment was made from a personal account linked to their shared bank fund." Back to Lana. "And prior to that, did you or did you not coordinate dates with him in Dallas and Miami, under the guise of work training and a girls' weekend?" She started, but Dan was already reaching into his folder. "Would you like me to read the exact messages? Including the part where you said," he glanced down, "he thinks this trip will fix us." "It won't, but at least the resort has good lighting for photos." The courtroom was so quiet I could hear the air conditioner hum. Dan took a step back. No further questions. Lana looked like she wanted to disappear. Her lawyer didn't say a word. Maybe he knew better than to throw a life vest into a sinking ship. The judge leaned back in his chair. "We'll reconvene next week for final arguments and distribution ruling." Gavel. Recess. Outside, I didn't speak. I just stood there on the courthouse steps, watching people walk past like they were in some other world, one where this kind of betrayal didn't happen in aisle 24C of a plane. Dan walked up beside me. "You okay?" "I will be," I said, and I meant it. It was raining the morning of the final hearing. Not hard, just that cold, steady kind of drizzle that makes everything feel heavier than it should. I sat in my car outside the courthouse for 10 full minutes before I went in. I didn't need to rehearse anything. I wasn't the one on trial, but it still felt like something inside me was about to be sentenced too. Lana was already inside when I got there. Her hair was pulled back tighter than usual, her expression blank. Not sad, not angry, just empty. Her lawyer sat beside her, flipping through papers that I knew couldn't save her now. The judge entered. Same steady pace. Same unreadable face. He sat down, adjusted his glasses, and began without fanfare. "I've reviewed the evidence. I've reviewed the testimonies. The facts are not in dispute." He looked up, straight at Lana. The respondent knowingly coordinated and engaged in an extramarital relationship. This relationship was funded, at least in part, using shared marital assets. These actions were not spontaneous or reactive but premeditated, as supported by the documented communication and financial transactions. Her lawyer tried to speak, but the judge raised a hand to silence him. This court finds the respondent's behavior to be a clear and deliberate violation of marital trust and financial obligation. Accordingly, I am ruling in favor of the petitioner. He picked up the file beside him and read calmly. 70/30th Division of Assets. In favor of the petitioner. Primary ownership of the marital home and vehicle granted to the petitioner. No spousal support awarded to the respondent. Legal fees to be paid by the respondent in full. Vacation expenses identified as marital misuse to be credited back to the petitioner from final asset split. No one moved. No one breathed. The judge closed the file and said, simply, "Court is adjourned." Lana didn't look at me as we exited the room. But just before the doors swung closed behind her, she turned, just for a second, and gave me a look I still can't fully explain. Not hatred, not sorrow, just the kind of stunned disbelief of someone who thought they could lie their way through anything. She opened her mouth like she wanted to say something, but I walked away before she could. Dan followed me out. "Well," he said, "you've got your life back." I nodded. I wasn't smiling. Not yet. But somewhere deep inside, I felt a knot untie. That night, I drove home alone. Rain on the windshield, verdict in my pocket, silence in the car. And for the first time in over a year, I didn't feel like I was waiting for the next blow to land. I pulled into the driveway, shut off the engine, and just sat there. No more lies. No more second chances. No more pretending. Just peace. And that was enough.